Q&A. Thank you. We do a little Q&A with the performers, 10 minutes, maybe 15 if there's a lot of questions. So think about anything you want to ask when you watch the performers tonight. Why they did something, why they wrote a particular thing, or let them know a particular scene that you really liked. Whatever, anything you have, they'll all be out here. It's sort of fun. Okay, and breaking news, submissions, I'm not looking at you, Bill. Submissions for January through June for you to be on the Monday Night Marsh stage are open right now. So if you have a story you want to tell, or you have a one-person crazy show that you want to try out, crazy, I mean, that's sort of brilliant, creative, wonderful, go to the Monday Night Marsh page at the marsh.org website, and we are accepting admissions for, January through June. Okay, and let's see, the last thing, we have a lot of times, well, let me take that back. We've had a number of times when shows that started on the Monday Night Marsh stage ended up as primetime main stage shows at the Marsh. So we have shows that are primetime and ready to go, and a couple of them right now. One here at the Marsh, San Francisco, Dan Hoyle, his final two performances this weekend of Border People, which I would say in this day and age, he did it a few years ago, but it's just still really relevant. It's about immigration and immigrants, and oh, heaven knows we need it. Very empathetic piece. And that's here at the Marsh in San Francisco this weekend, and then it must close. And in Berkeley, just got extended, a show that I have not seen yet, but I've heard a lot of good things about. Malia Mills in The Allure of Thug Life. That has been extended into December. So if you want to know more about those shows, go to the marsh.org website to get details on those and other shows coming up. Okay, that's pretty much it for me. Are the phones off?
Yeah.
Yay, all right. So our first performer tonight is Jerry Metzger in Where I Come From in America. This is the second half of the story of Fergus Malone, a victim of the Great Famine in Ireland. This section begins with Fergus's arrival as a refugee in New York and his steady determination to stabilize himself in an unwelcome and often hostile environment. Please welcome Jerry Metzger.
What can I do for you, fella? Check out your tongue? You looking for a job? I saw the sign in the window. You're not Irish, are you? Oh, yes, sir. I'm Fergus Maloney from County Clare. Can't you read? No Irish wanted. But sir, I can read and write. I can be of help to you. Get out. You deaf? Get out. I don't need your kind around here. Fergus Maloney was 19 years old when he arrived in North America in the autumn of 1847. 2 years earlier, in 1845, the potato, the only food of the Irish poor, rotted in the ground. The potato blight, as it was called, ran every year from 1845 to 1852, making more and more people more and more desperate. Most lost their homes. Many died of starvation and disease, and many fled the country. Fergus came to New York by ship with other famine refugees. It were night when we left the ship, raining. All the shops were closed and there were nowhere for us to go. No one to tell us what to do. They were for us and all, and one of the lads seen some planks against the side of a building, and so we put our bags around us and the planks over us to keep us out of the rain. In 1847, roughly 40 coffin ships, as they were called, arrived carrying between 200 and 400 people each, arrived in the port of New York. From 1845 to 1852, 1.5 million people boarded ships to North America. 2/3 of them arrived in New York. In the morning, we went our own ways, and I went to 5 places looking for work, but no one would have me. No Irish wanted. The historical record of Irish immigration to the New World begins in the 1600s, when between 50 and 100,000 people left Ireland as indentured servants, rebels, prisoners, and felons. During the 1700s, about 500,000 more came. Families and individuals, and many more in the early 1800s. Most of them were Presbyterian of Scottish descent. For more than 100 years, these people proudly bore the name, a designation of being Irish. That is, until the destitute Catholic Irish arrived. The Presbyterians and others carried their prejudice with them to the New World, and in no short order renamed themselves the Scotch Irish to distinguish themselves from the Catholic Irish. When night came, I weren't near the first place I slept. There were people all over the docks huddled together. Some were in the recesses of doors, and others were just lying on the ground, sleeping wherever they could, just like in Ireland. Myself, I slept under some stairs. It was just after dawn when I heard some loud noise and banging around, and I seen there were some boats unloading fish. You there, grab me them crates and bring them over here. Yeah, you, I don't see nobody else around here. Give me them crates. And so I did. I helped him unload his fish. He told me his brother were sick that day and he needed the help. In the end, he gave me his lunch and a nickel for my work. I also met a lad who were working at the docks, and that night he took me to a place wherein I could sleep. We walked down away from the docks, down 3 long, narrow streets. We took a sharp turn and then went down some stairs. There were a fella with a candle sitting outside a door. We each gave him a penny, and he opened the door. It was dark inside. Oh, we went in, and he closed the door behind us. I couldn't see a thing. The other lad would lead me by the arm until he found a spot for us. It weren't comfortable, but it were better than sleeping in a ditch. Welcome to 5 Points, the most notorious neighborhood in all of North America. The home to waves of Irish immigrants, as well as Italian, Chinese, German, African, and Eastern European. 5 Points was a densely populated enclave named for an intersection of 5 streets, and it's located currently in Chinatown. The people lived in filthy tenements where the wells were dug right next to the outhouses. Also called the 6th Ward, 5 Points was renowned for garbage-covered streets, prostitution, gambling, violence, drunkenness, and abject poverty. $5 apples for a penny. 5 apples for a penny. There were people with carts selling things, and I thought to myself, well, I could do that. Where'd you get them, and where'd you get that cart? Look, either you want 5 apples or you don't. I don't need 5 apples. Well, then get out of here. There were a lad where I was sleeping, asked me to write a letter for him to send back to his brothers in County Galway. I said, well, sure, and if he would give me a penny for it. We went to a pub. And he started telling me about his life, his house, his little garden, the lass he were thinking of marrying. He had me write that he were boss of a construction crew, that he had to meet 5 times a week. I couldn't believe it. This lad, he worked 7 days a week sweeping up dust in a church. Saloons were more than a common sight in Lower Manhattan. In fact, in 1840, there were more than 2,000 of them in 2 square miles. A penny writing letters here and there weren't enough to live on. Oh, there were another pub where I joined some lads who were looking for work. People to hire us. Some days we'd get work. Hauling wood or coal or digging trenches or shoveling muck. At the end of the day, we get paid. Sometimes it were money, and sometimes it were food and drink. One evening, I were sitting in a pub reading a newspaper I found. So, you can read and, oh, yes, sir, I can read and write. And can you count? Do you know your numbers? Oh, yes, sir, I can do me sums. And could you write it all down on a paper? Yes, sir. You could use a fellow with your talents. He took me to an alley. We were very late. Then some other lads come. 2 of them have these big cages with roosters in them, just a squawking and a making a fuss. And then all the lads come up to me and they say, 10 cents on Mighty Eagle, 50 cents on Fighting Irish. And it went on like that. And I got to take their money and write it all down. And then we lads all form a circle. And the fellas with the cages open them up and the roosters just go at each other. And everybody starts cheering and shouting. And in the end, the roosters don't look so good. One, I think we're dead. But I got to get to work. The lads are coming up for their money, the ones who won, who didn't win. And they need their cash so they can make another bet. There were 3 fights in all, and at the end of the night, the boss man gave me $2 for me work. And he told me to meet him again 2 nights later at the pub. But we weren't there. And the lads looking for work outside of the other pub were gone too. I have studied the Hibernian stignomony intently. Oh. And the evidence is clear. The head, the bulging forward of the lower part of the face, a large mouth and thick lips. Nose short, upturned, frequently concave, with yawning nostrils. This explains very clearly the propensity of the Irish to drink, to his inability to perform rudimentary intellectual tasks. Manual labor, yes, but he must not be left to his own devices. For his nature is sloth. His habit is inebriation. His manner is vulgar. His urges are animalistic and truly silent. He has no physical restraint. Hey fella, you looking for a place to live? To work? I got both for you if you're interested. I were reading these advertisements about working on the railroad. It's all lies. But the poster says room and board $1 a day, out in the open air. I done it. Look at me hand. Don't work no more. And me leg is hard to work too. I were in a place where we were building the railroads. Poster I seen told me they were looking for 100 good men. Well, there were 100 men to start, and then 100 more, and then more. And every time the pay went down, take it or leave it, they said. Huh. Then I had me accident. I couldn't work no more. They left me bleeding, me hand smashed, lying by the side of the track. Get out, the foreman told me. Oh, I couldn't even walk. Well, how did you get here? There were churchmen that helped me. Now, I got a friend looking for a few strong fellas to work on his farm. Now, it's outside of New York, but there's a place to sleep, meals. You interested? Well, sure, I can do that. I got a fellow with a boat to take you across the river. And on the other side, there's a wagon to take you to the farm itself. And food along the way. Well, thing is, I need you to give me the money in advance, to pay to get there. 15 cents. 15 cents. Well, think all the money you'll be making. 15 cents is a small price to pay for a future, and you got room and board to go with it. How about it? You want to do it? I gotta know, there's lots of other men around who would jump at an opportunity like this. All it takes is 15 cents. New York was a major hiring center for jobs outside, all around the countryside. For men subsisting as day laborers in crowded tenements, such offers were difficult to refuse, and they signed up by the hundreds. All right, I can get your money. Where do I go? What do I do? You ain't got it now, like sewed up in your clothes? I can get it. I kept my money hidden away. Well, I need at least 5 cents right now. Well, that's your guarantee. Then I'll meet you tomorrow over there at that pub at noon. How's that? I need an hour to get your money. Look, I need 5 cents now or it's no deal. And just like that, he walked away. The next day I went to that saloon at noon, but he weren't there. Actual jobs were advertised all over: railroad jobs, canal jobs, farm jobs. But conditions on the job didn't usually match the glowing descriptions on the advertising posters. In fact, labor contractors exploited their Irish workers ruthlessly, well aware that there were hundreds more just waiting to take their place. It was early in the morning. I hadn't worked for days. There were a well behind the house wherein I could get me a drink before anyone woke up to chase me away. Sometimes the hunger weren't so bad if I weren't so thirsty. Today, we think of New York City as the entire island of Manhattan. However, in its early years, most of New York existed below 23rd Street. And in the north, farms and wilderness and small villages like Seneca Village, a community of middle-class African Americans. I heard there might be work north of the city. I lost me place to sleep. I had no money, no food. It don't take much to walk when you're hungry. Your legs just kind of move on their own. I asked for work at various farms, but no one would hire me. I kept walking until I couldn't go no more. I set myself down near a group of small houses, and I was thinking that was the end. Then these two ladies come up to me. Their skin were dark. One lifted me up and the other put some water to my lips. Then they give me some bread. I nearly threw it all up, but they were patient with me. They gave me some milk too. They told me that they could help me until I got my strength back, but I couldn't stay there. Then they give me 2 bottles of water and some food. Go back to 5 Points, they said. In 1857, using the power of eminent domain, the city of New York seized the land of Seneca Village for what is now Central Park, displacing the hundreds of people that lived there. My food ran out again. I hardly worked. I was sleeping in an alley when some screaming woke me. It was still night. I picked myself up as best as I could, and I run to where they were screaming. There were a house on fire, and the woman were screaming and pointing at one of the windows. I quick ran in and ran up the stairs to the room where I thought she were pointing, and there were two wee ones. I could hardly see them because the smoke burned the eyes, but I picked up one in each arm and carried them down. The fire brigade were just arriving, and after I gave the wee ones to the ma'am, I helped. I joined the brigade, the buckets, put out the fire. It took a long time, and finally we put the fire out. You there, what are you doing here? I heard some screaming and I come to help. Yeah, we're all going to O'Brien's, have a drink. You're coming with us. He was the man in charge of fighting fires in the area. At the pub, he gave me a bit of whiskey, which made me head all float. When was the last time you ate, boy? Hey, bring my friend some food over here. From the earliest days of the Catholic Irish arriving in North America, there were Christian ministries that sought to convert them as much as aid them. The Ladies' Aid Society of the Presbyterian Church enlisted Reverend Horace Taylor to save the souls of the lost. Now, we told you, Reverend, that your responsibility is to spread the word of Christ through Bible study and prayer. This is the only way that these poor, pitiful creatures will ever rise to heaven. Mr. Jones, morals are not their problem, or being Catholic. What they need, their problem is a lack of work, of wages, of food. That's the devil talking, and you know it. They have made their choice to sin. It is only God that can save them through prayer and repentance. The fire warden introduced me to Reverend Taylor, and he took me to a place wherein I could sleep on a cot, and there were some other lads there. In the morning, these ladies come in and they bring us broth and bread and an egg. Oh, I ate an egg for breakfast. And then Reverend Taylor divided us into 3 groups, and I went with a group of lads that were helping to build a house. I've done that for 2 weeks, and then during that time, I also helped put out 3 fires. Fergus, one of the boys tells me that you write letters for them to send home to Ireland. Is that true? Oh, well, yes, sir. I have someone I want you to meet. And then he took me back to the docks, into a printer shop. It was the same shop I went to the first day I got off of the boat. So, you can read and write? What, cat got your tongue? I'm afraid to say anything for fear he would know where I were from. Yeah, here, read this. All workers must report to the factory on time. For every 10 minutes a worker is late, he will be fined 1 penny. 1 penny? 3 times tardy within a 2-week period will result. Yeah, you can read. You haven't worried too much about writing. We have the press for that. Now, come back tomorrow at 7 a.m. Oh, and there's a cot in the back. You can sleep there starting tomorrow. Oh, thank you, sir. What's your name, fella? Fergus. Fergus Maloney.
This weird new tool is quickly becoming the most popular Christmas gift of 2023. It combines all
met my love by the gasworks wall. Dreamed a dream by the old canal. I kissed my girl by the factory wall.
Wow, well, the immigrant story never seems to really change. Jerry Pritzker. All right, our next performer is Herb Mence. And yay, my Uncle Sam, my military family, and me. This piece is a series of interconnected, non-linear memories from the point of view of an aging military dependent who is willing to share traumatic moments from the regulated subculture of his childhood and youth. Please welcome Herb Mence.
I've come out of my footlocker to bring to your attention a little known aspect of military history, the military family. Military history has privileged the exploits of men on the field of battle while neglecting the roles of military dependents, spouses, and children who, along with their spouse, parent, soldier, comprise the military family. Tonight, I offer you, the audience, a single account of this marginalized history from the point of view of an aging military dependent. My history began in 1948 when Uncle Sam served my dad with a draft notice. He was living in rural North Carolina at the time, but in just 1 month, he had enlisted in the United States Air Force, signing a 3-year contract, becoming an airman, Air Force airman. In 1950, the Korean War began. As a result, Uncle Sam pushed legislation through Congress, Public Law 51, extending the enlistments of all active duty military personnel. This meant my dad, who had but a few months left in his 3-year contract, would not be able to exit the Air Force in July 1951. Stationed at Offutt Air Force Base near Omaha, Nebraska, and stuck in the Air Force for an additional 3 years. My mom and dad were married in February 1952, and in January 1953, I was born in a military hospital, not as a civilian and not as a member of the public, but as a military dependent in a military family, where a world of men in uniform, a system of authority that demanded obedience and conformity, and a learned helplessness would shape my future. Now, if you think about it for a moment, I was an accidental military dependent. November 2023, San Francisco, California. I'm 70 years old. For my first 15 and a half years, I performed primarily on stages located on property owned or paid for by the federal government. In particular, on or near Air Force bases where I learned my role as a military dependent. years later, as a civilian adult, I learned that military families and military dependents had a history that went back hundreds of years. Then they were called camp followers. Camp followers are the spouses and children who follow their spouse, parent, soldier from camp to camp, location to location. Like those historic camp followers, my military family just didn't follow my dad, but we helped out in securing our needs. For instance, cooking, cleaning, laundering, polishing shoes, scrubbing spotless metal garbage cans, offering emotional and psychological support, especially to my dad, and eventually providing additional income. Now, my mom said that we had no family relatives living anywhere near where we were camped. But my father said, yes, we did have a relative, my Uncle Sam. Now, when my dad was stationed either overseas or on temporary duty away from his military family, which I calculated to be roughly 4 years in total, we could have used a little help to get out of a jam or two from Uncle Sam, but that support didn't really materialize. But no matter where we were camped, when my dad came home, he came home to us, his military family, where a less visible military drama was played out. May 1959, Kelly Air Force Base, Kelly Holmes, San Antonio, Texas. I didn't see my mom leave our family Ford facility. And when I did, she was standing near the driveway, but she's not dressed in the government issue. She's got a dress on with low-cut black shoes, white socks up to her ankles. I'm just a little confused because I thought Mom was ironing my dad's shirts that morning. Mom, what's going on? He lets out a tremendous sigh that frightens me just a little bit. And then I see, oh, she's been crying. I'm going back to Omaha for a while. Oh yeah, how are you going to do that? I'm waiting for a taxi to take me to the bus station. She lets out another sigh. I can no longer live in third-rate housing with no screens on the windows. Eat only military food from cartons, boxes, or cans. We never go anywhere, and we never visit anyone. I don't know any of the neighbors. I have no one to talk to, no friends, no family, except for your dad, and he's not always interested. Well, Mom, what about Uncle Sam? When you need him, he doesn't need you. While we're standing ill at ease, my dad moves through the main gate and stands next to my mom. We exchange a two-finger salute. My dad is wearing an Air Force khaki uniform. His starch and iron shirt extends out from his chest as if it was a hardened external shell. His garrison cap is pointed directly at my mom, but no item on his military uniform projects the presence of military protocol than the technical sergeant stripes on his shirt sleeves. From them, a pulsating glow envelops us, encoding radio silence, signaling imposed discipline. My mom has no rank as a military spouse. Without uttering a word, we follow my dad back into our military family facility. July 1967. Ant Air Force Base, Colorado Springs, Colorado. I'm 14 and a half years old. By this time, I knew what my dad was doing for the Air Force. He worked in supply, like the word supply and supply lines. He moved bulk material across established routes to various Air Force installations around the country. My military family also relied on those Air Force supply lines. Due to my dad's limited salary, we shopped at two Air Force institutions almost exclusively. The commissary, the Air Force's imitation of a grocery store, and the Post Exchange, the Air Force's imitation of a department store. With my mom working full-time, with my added income as a paperboy, and my dad's gambling winnings at the bowling alley, our cash flow increased in 1966. And as a result, every now and then we could shop at civilian retail outlets. And to my complete surprise, mom and dad put a down payment on a small house in the civilian sector. Now, in 1966, there was a plan in play I knew nothing about. My dad had chosen to stay in Colorado Springs when he retired from the Air Force. He had made a deal, according to my brother, with Uncle Sam that Ant Air Force Base would be his final duty station. And when he retired in 1968, we would stay in Colorado Springs and my military family would be a thing of the past. Well, in July 1967, there was another plan in play. Uncle Sam got on the phone, called my dad, ordered him to report to Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base, Saigon, South Vietnam. My dad never explicitly told me he was going to the war in South Vietnam. My mom did. My mom also told me that my dad believed he'd be killed in that war and we needed to move closer to his family in North Carolina. There was one thing truly unusual about this pending relocation. My younger brother and my older sister, they told my dad to his face they weren't going to move. Now, I knew their rebellion was foolish, but I had to feel good that they spoke up, because I used to do that, but I didn't do that anymore. I knew it was useless to speak up. My mom reassured me, though, that in North Carolina, I'd make new friends, I'd go to a good school, Uncle Sam would find us housing, and we'd be closer to my dad's family. And yes, we would be closer to my dad's family, but I'd done this moving thing before, and I knew the rest of what mom said wasn't true. She was just sugarcoating the fact that when Uncle Sam made a decision, it was final, and there was nothing we could do about it. April 1964, Truax Air Force Base, Hay Park Military Family Housing, Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. In the 5th grade in a civilian school, a civilian student I didn't know too well called me a military brat. I'd never heard the label before. I didn't know what it meant. Generally, I didn't let on to civilian students I didn't know very well my status as a military dependent. They just didn't get it at that age. But this time it must have been the fact that I had a military style haircut and those military style Oxford shoes. They gave me away. In fact, later I learned that these were standard features of military subculture for the male military dependent. Kind of an Uncle Sam fashion statement. Well, anyway, I looked at the word, Brad. The word implied a spoiled, arrogant, and unruly child. Me? In 1964? A spoiled, arrogant, and unruly child? It was impossible. I was growing up in a welfare for warfare family struggling to make ends meet. Besides, I was the firstborn son of a career Air Force NCO. I didn't get away with anything. Sometime later, as a civilian adult, the usefulness of the term military brat became clear. Public relations. The term disguised the fact that I was growing up in a nuclear family in the nuclear age, where we struggled to cope pretty much on our own with psychological, social, and economic challenges that Uncle Sam didn't want any mindful civilians to scrutinize. You thought Uncle Sam only used public relations when he had to justify military intervention in foreign countries. December 1960. Donaldson Air Force Base, Piedmont, South Carolina. I'm almost 8 years old now. My dad, a parent airman, got up really early one morning to catch a flight on a military transport plane to Osan Air Force Base in Seoul, South Korea. Once again, Uncle Sam had called him on the phone and ordered him to this new duty location. My dad would be away from us on this tour of duty for 13 months. The rest of us would stay in our family facility in Piedmont and wait for him to come home. Well, besides waiting, it meant that Mom and I, on our own, would have to go through the main gate to access the commissary where we bought our food and the post exchange where, well, whatever else they had on sale, you never knew. But there was a problem. I didn't have a military photo ID. So we found the place where the photos were taken. I had my photo taken. It came back a week later, and when I looked at it, there was a odd-shaped patch of hair sticking out of the side of my head. Oh, then I got it. That's how I'm connected to the Jesus. You've never heard of the Jesus. Uncle Sam has an acronym for everything connected in the Air Force, including the guidance system. Its acronym is spelled GSYS and is pronounced Jesus. Well, now you know. But back then, I knew that my military photo ID was concrete evidence that I was linked to this network. Well, as it happens, Mom and I needed to go shopping at the commissary. But we had to get through the main gate. There was an MP on duty. I handed him my brand new military photo ID. He took a look at it He looked at me. He took a look at it. He looked at me. And then he said, son, this is what you're going to look like when you're dead. And you can thank your Uncle Sam for that. Well, with that, it's time for me to return to my footlocker.
Thank you. Thank you.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Another great story. Herb Mence, everybody. All right. Okay, our final performer this evening is Wynd Kaufman in The Betrayal That Is Not Divorce. And just so you know, what you're going to see tonight is the final section of a complete piece. Okay, so would you let your friends determine the financial settlement for your divorce? Wynd tells her story of doing just that. She also explores the collateral damage of divorce and shares her journey of getting to the other side. Please welcome Wynd Kaufman.
Elizabeth, Steve, Karen, Eric, Becky, Roland. Where do we begin? Let's pray. God, thank you for these friends who have gathered to support me and Greg. Please give them wisdom. Guide them to be fair and loving to both of us. In Jesus' name, amen. The six of you have known us forever. You were at our wedding. I know you just want what's best for both of us. Please know that whatever you decide, I will accept for Greg's and my divorce settlement. This can't be happening. For over 30 years, Greg has been my best friend and lover, my life partner and co-parent, my rock. God, please bring him back. If not to me, to himself. It was my idea to gather these friends together to help us with our divorce. Eric, he was one of Greg's 5 roommates during graduate school. They were all part of a Christian community, the Ark. Eric married Karen the year after Greg married me. We bought a house together over 30 years ago. We still live in it. Well, not Greg. Elizabeth and Steve, also members of the Ark. I met them when they had just married. They were the ones I called when I found out I was pregnant. Oh my God, I was in shock. It was just a fling. I was trying to move on from my unrequited love for Greg, who had made it crystal clear that we would never be anything more than friends. That changed. Elizabeth and Steve came over immediately and stayed up with me until 3 o'clock in the morning, helping me to process. Thank God I had a choice. And thank God I chose the right one for me. They agreed to be my birth coaches. Becky. When I first became a Christian, she invited me to be her roommate at the Arts Community House. I'm sure you know the one. It's the largest Victorian in Berkeley, just down the street from the Homemade Cafe on Dwight Way. Karen. Becky sprung her on me the day after I moved in. And for a teaspoon. Just a few weeks later, I had to stop complaining about unexpected roommates when I found out I was pregnant. That first year of Alexandra's life, living with Becky and Karen was one of the best in mine. Roland. He and Becky dated that year. They got married the year before Greg and I. Our children grew up together. Their son and Greg share a birthday. We laughed that despite the 40-year age difference, the gifts were interchangeable. Cool gadgets, radio-controlled airplanes, books with warmongering themes. I know it's unusual to ask friends to settle the divorce, but Greg had hired this cutthroat attorney. Wendy, my attorney says that you owe me rent for the time you've spent in the house without me. What? Divorce is not an amateur sport. Greg, let's go out of the box here. Instead of a painful, prolonged, and expensive court battle, let's ask our friends to help us. You hate lawyers anyway. You would never support me going to law school. You said the last thing that this world needs is another lawyer. You fired 2 therapists and a mediator. What makes you think this is going to work? I know that first therapist was a little bit in love with you. How is it fair marriage counseling when she continually tells me what a great guy you are and how lucky I am to have her? I liked her. What about the second therapist? She wasn't fired. Her job was done. She exposed that you were not in therapy to heal the marriage, but merely as an exit strategy. It is not true. I tried. What about the mediator? I thought mediation was more than just a cold division of assets. I need a process that attempts at some healing. One that will take into account things that the legal system won't. You owe me law school and individual therapy and a facelift. Greg just continues his objections, calling me crazy and abnormal. But he finally agrees to let the 6 settle our divorce. He's afraid he'll look bad if he doesn't. So The 6 start the process with me. Next, they'll go to Greg's, and then they'll deliberate without either of us. Everything is to be completely confidential. But a few weeks later, Elizabeth slipped. She told me that when they gathered at Greg's, he pulled out his computer for a PowerPoint presentation. I can see it. Here are a few legal points from my attorney, an expert in divorce. It is incumbent upon the lower wage earner to maximize their income so as to become independent and minimize the need for spousal support. He needs to teach summer school. No, she never has. Please, hold off on questions until the end of my presentation. Pensions are community property. Social Security is not. Hence, I get half of Wendy's pension. My benefits are off limits. Oh, at the end of the presentation, there's a long silence. Roland finally breaks it. Hey, this is your wife. I don't know what happened after that because Elizabeth realized that she was breaking confidentiality and stopped. But I know what should have happened because that was the moment, their opportunity. When Roland said, Greg, this is your wife, Elizabeth should have said, Greg, you promised God to cherish Wendy for the rest of your life. And then Steve would have said, hey, buddy, you got to work on your problems. You're only hurting yourself, turning against Wendy, against God. And then Becky would have said, Greg, this is so unlike you, this coldness, this cruelty. And then Aaron would have said, man, we were at your wedding. We promised to support you in your marriage. Give us a chance. Aaron would have finished. Greg, stop being such a jerk. And Greg, his response? Jesus, what have I done? Wendy is the love of my life. Things got bad, but they could get better with your help and God's. Yeah, in my dreams. Instead, the 6 focus on Greg's spreadsheets and his lawyer's non-negotiables. They work diligently throughout the weekend. On Sunday, they present their proposal. It becomes the basis of the legal document that slowly wends its way through the court system and eventually gets signed off by a faceless, distant judge. That Sunday evening, Becky and Roland are getting ready to leave. Thank you guys for coming. You know, all the way from Spokane. I know it's been really hard and hard to believe. Divorce just happens? No. 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 Becky and Roland slip out the door. They have a plane to catch. Eventually, I get up, go to bed. Another sleepless night. In the morning, Eric comes up. I'm worried that you're losing all your friends. You need to call Becky and Roland and apologize to them. You freaked them out last night. Hey, Becky. I'm sorry I lost it when you left. I didn't mean to freak you out. Don't be silly. You know you're just going through a rough patch. Good care of yourself. I'll call you soon. Bye. Bye. Wait all summer for their call. I wonder about Ragbray. Ragbray. Really awesome, great bicycle ride across Iowa. It's a thing. Greg and I did it with them. I don't see Becky and Roland until they're driving through Berkeley on their way to their son's graduation. They stay with Karen and Eric downstairs. But before they leave, they knock on my door. Oh, hi. Come in. Sit down. How are you guys? We're great. We love retirement. We're taking long road trips, hiking, biking. Ragbray's next month. You still do that. Nice. Did you do it last year? Yeah. With Greg? Yeah. That he would do it with us. He showed up with Susan. It was so awful for us. Did you say anything? Well, what could we say? Something? A partner is not an interchangeable bicycle part? Or maybe it's too soon for you to spend time with my replacement? Night. About it. So for us. Divorce is a violent sport with immense collateral damage. It's been almost 8 years since my divorce was finalized, and 7 years since that conversation. So much has changed, especially my perspective. Even in preparing this segment of my story, I consulted with Elizabeth on the scene with Greg's PowerPoint. I wanted to understand why the fantasy I envisioned didn't happen. Elizabeth told me that the silence was because they were all shell-shocked by his callousness. They gave up on trying to reach the Greg that they had known, and instead determined the best they can do was to get a settlement that I could live with. All these years, I've been so angry at them for not insisting on talking about more than just money. I see it differently now. They had their own sadness and grief. Suffering is not a competitive sport. They did the best they could. Today, Becky and Roland, they are not people in my life. I watch them on Facebook. They're grandparents now. They still do Ragbray. Karen and Eric. I still live in the house with them. Mostly it's awkward, sometimes tense. Once in a while, it's like old times. Steve and Elizabeth, if I had another life crisis, I'd call them in a heartbeat. Greg. He and Susan moved into the house that he bought in San Leandro. She still waxes about the happy and idyllic life that they had there for 5 years. It ended abruptly, just before the pandemic. Greg was murdered by Susan's son. Okay, yes, you heard that right. I'm not going to say it again. As for me, I am now Wynd. I got through what I call the dark years. It didn't happen overnight. But one day I woke up and I was okay. Then more than okay. I got happy. I'm living life more fully and joyfully than ever. And I will always grieve Greg. I wish that we had had the chance to become friends again. My memories of him, who he was, the laughter we shared, our co-parenting, all come back to me with enormous pleasure. I will always love Greg immensely.
Wake Kaufman, everybody. All right.
Holding on. It's very hard to do when love is gone, and that's no lie. Holding on. It's very hard to do when love is gone. Yeah, yeah. I know you gotta be. There ain't no sense in crying. It's time for you to leave. Time for you to leave. That's the bottom line. Oh,
Very intense pieces tonight. Really well done. Like I said, 3. He's testing you just here. That's. Anyway, anybody want to start things off with a question?
I'll start. So it was all very good. I enjoyed each one of the pieces individually. They were great. And they were very informative too, really. It was good information. So all 3 of you, or is it just one segment of a longer piece?
Well, it is for me.
Okay, and that was your last part of
Yeah, so there's actually 4 parts before that, which are actually a lot more entertaining and funny. But this was kind of the final, which I felt good about.
Okay, cool.
So for me, the character's journey begins when he starts, when he loses his home in Ireland. And then he loses his family in Ireland. That's the first half.
Okay.
And then he has no recourse, nowhere to go, like a lot of people did then, like 1.5 million. So there were 4 million people that lived in Ireland before the Great Famine. And by the time it was over, there were less than 2 million left.
Wow.
So, so then the second half is how is he gonna make it in New York? Because a lot of people didn't. Or it took them a very long time. And it went on until the 1900s. So there's a whole section where they started working in the coal mines in Virginia and Pennsylvania, and there were all kinds of battles and wars. So it's all one starting for the journey until he gets himself settled. So initially the piece that I performed is about an hour. And I just kept cutting the middle of it. So that it's down to the 20-minute-ish time frame.
And for me, did a longer performance here in 2018 that was a little more slapstickish, body stuff, similar themes this time, but it was 28 minutes long. And I think I've evolved, or devolved, I don't know, one way or the other. And so what I chose tonight were some of the points in that longer piece, but then a few other things. So it's a kind of standalone, like the other piece was kind of, I'm not really working on anything beyond that. I mean, I'm just really happy to be here. I mean, thank goodness there's the Marsh, on Monday night Marsh too.
Yes, in the front row.
I have a question to, should I Herb, is that what it is? Why would you choose to structure it not chronological order, going back and stuff?
Okay, again, the piece in 2018 was linear and chronological. And it was much longer, and I think that was my first time I performed in San Francisco, but I like non-linear, what would you call it? Disconnected, breaking the fourth wall, challenging the audience to, like, you have to be on your toes a little more to kind of know what's going on. And I'm not trying to make it too difficult, but I figured, because I gave the dates and you can kind of maybe rearrange them, and I forgot one part was when I didn't give my age, but that there was a lot there to help repiece it together, in a linear way. But this is what I like. I like non-linearity. Yeah.
I have one more question for you too. Is there a reason that we don't see Uncle Sam's face and what's in the coffin, or is that part of something else, or you brought it out but then really didn't use it?
To go to the latter part, the coffin. Thank you. You got my point. Well, but the Foot Locker is a standard piece of military equipment. I had one. My dad had, I don't know how many he had, and I eventually got one. It was let go at some point. I don't know when, but if you saw my image online, there was a picture of me in the background when I was young. It's on that same handout I gave you, and then there's a picture of me imposed on it, and then below there are 3 shadow people with little tiny representations of Uncle Sam, one big, one medium, and one small. And this is supposed to be the point in my life when Uncle Sam, I've exercised the guy, but he's such an important person. I had to have some figure, some emblem of him, but his back is turned to us, and that's what it was like kind of growing up. But it also means that he's no longer, he's irrelevant now, finally,
Okay.
Nice question, thank you.
Yes, in the back, or sorry, in the second row.
A lot of good history of the migration from Ireland. You initially said that they were the death ships, and
They were called coffin ships.
coffin ships. And so a large percentage of people died en route.
Yes. And I don't know that particularly is one of the things that the ship owners really couched a lot on purpose, because they were paid by number of passengers that arrived, not number of passengers that got on board. However, the big history of it is, and the great tragedy is, so the importation of Africans to be slaves ended about the time that right before this started, and the Africans were brought over and were treated better than the Irish were treated on their planes, because they had value, right? They were money, and the Irish did not. So most of them, many of them had diseases and stuff, and they were all crammed in the hold. and like ate to a bed, and if the person next to you died, then you slept with a dead person until you got there. And if somebody got cholera, then everybody got cholera, right? Because they were all using the same buckets for the lake. It was just a really horrific experience. And they were in the North Sea, which isn't a very pleasant sea, right? The Titanic is the perfect example of that. That's the route that all these ships took. So it was a pretty horrific, and they called them the coffin ships because so many people died in them. And sometimes they, would go through and throw them overboard like any others, but sometimes they were just there until they got to the port. And there were no immigration services at that time. Zero. So people got off the boats and that was it.
Well, it's compared to what little I know of how the slaves were transported. And you're saying that that was much better.
It's not, I know, I said it too, but that all the stories that I read, including like where all the histories were read, that this was because the Africans were chained,
Yeah.
which these folks were not, but they were fed and they were clean and they were all of those things like cattle, right? If they were treated like cattle, whereas the human beings had no value. Once they paid their fare, they were, who cares what happened to them? They weren't let out, and the Africans weren't either, but that was the big difference, that the Africans coming over were money and the Irish were not.
So the ships were paid by the people who got on, but it didn't matter whether or not they got to the other end.
Not really, but they did try, but they did, no, you're right, no, they did.
So I'm just speaking as a retired accountant.
Yeah,
You get
that's
your
it.
money, you don't care whether they get there.
That's correct. There were these, you pay your passage or somebody paid your passage and you were supposed to have a certain amount of food for this passage, a certain amount of water, certain amount of, but they didn't always have that. Sometimes the food was rotten. They were supposed to be allowed on the deck every 24 hours for like a half hour for exercise. But again, it's the North Sea, and if the seas got rough, then nobody was allowed. I mean, it was just this horrible travel experience. Two people that were already starving to death or sick. Yes, please.
And more of a comment, well, a question to you that I enjoyed each one of yours, and you became endearing to me, each one of you, it's great. And are you all doing, or any of you doing a next work? Is this what you're doing at this time in your life? Are you writing at the moment and practicing?
I'll go first.
Okay, yes.
I started this class, I started taking classes at the Marsh in 2018, which is kind of, during those dark years. And it was therapy. And it was just something I found to do that was really satisfying and fun. And it was a whole different world. I just retired from City College of San Francisco, where I taught for 40 years. So now I actually took another class, and I'm starting a piece about falling in love, or having my first date after 40 years. And so, but I don't know, it's not, I don't quite need it as much as I did, but it's fun. And so I don't know, it's more like a hobby.
Well, I am a theater professional. So this is one of about 20 plus plays that I've written, some solo, some not. I performed at the San Francisco Fringe Festival several years ago, another series of pieces. I have about 10 plays being circulated around to be done. I actually directed one of the most successful Marsh productions here of all time, called History of World War II, starring, written and performed by John Fisher, and there's a big poster of it over there. So I do a lot of theater, and I'm also a trapeze artist. So this is officially my third performance of anything this year. I don't act very often, and I'm mostly a writer, so that's why I'm like, it takes me forever to learn my lines because I'm constantly like rewriting while I'm trying to memorize. And I'm like, oh, no, change that, so I don't get it. So if you come back in 2 weeks, I will have it down, right? And I'm like, oh, I have to have the script so I can keep acting, because if I don't have the script, then it's like trying to remember it and not acting as well. But I have many projects going on and maybe give you time. I've been working in the Bay Area theater since 1997. I've done, I don't know, like 7 or 8 pieces here. Arnie's been to many of them.
You're an acrobat.
Yes, and I'm an acrobat.
I view this as part of my activism in a way. The pieces that I performed before in New York and in Minneapolis, they were conceptual, but they were trying to again rethink narrative, rethink the audience, rethink my role, our relationship. And so that was my conceptual, whatever came to my mind kind of projects. I think what happened in 2018 is and then that today is that I finally got over my inability to accept the fact that I grew up in a military family. So now I'm talking about it as an from an activist point of view as well. But earlier, going back to 1981, I wouldn't have touched it. It was just like Uncle Sam was huge. Like this thing like Sisyphus. I mean, you gotta push him up and he comes right back at me, So that's over now. So now I can finally talk about that. Yes.
So I'm curious, did you ever have a conversation with your father about what caused him to, because he was going to actually be leaving the military in 1951 and got redeployed, and then all of a sudden it became a career.
Right. Well, again,
What happened there?
well, again, in my rap, I said something about how Uncle Sam pushed legislation through Congress. It's a fact. It's called Public Law 51.
Right.
It extended the enlistments of all current military personnel. So even though my dad had 3 months left on his contract, they added another year, and then by that time he told me that he was frozen in to the military because the Korean War was on. War changes all the rules. So then after 3 more years, let's see, there was mommy, daddy, me, my brother, and I had a sister on the way. And he said, I didn't think I was going to be able to support everybody. We moved back to North Carolina. He came from the farm in a very rural part of North Carolina. They may not have had indoor plumbing yet or electricity on the farm. That would have been 54, 55, somewhere like that. So it just, as somebody who was a Christian, very, very deeply religious, never said anything about it. He had this monumental sense of duty. So where's the cash coming from? Uncle Sam. So he just stayed, and then then it's all about trying to get out and still be alive. But like my dad never joined any veterans organizations, never. We never celebrated Veterans Day, never. I mean, he was just a quiet, introverted, religious guy who made money at the bowling alley.
He came back from Vietnam.
Yes, he was there. He was in Vietnam for the Big and the Little Tet. He was at Tan Son Nhut. They were attacked repeatedly. He was a trained marksman because he grew up on the farm. He was a hunter. I learned to be a hunter, but I gave all that up at some point because the military spoiled that relationship because he was gone for so many years. When at formative times, I became like my mom, and you're not supposed to do that when you're socialized as the firstborn child in a military family. You're supposed to be like my dad. I wasn't like my dad. I just kept peeling away the things that were, I gave up bowling, I gave up hunting. I didn't want to play sports, but again, it was something you could do, right? I did all these conservative things, you know?
It's pretty, if I may, it's pretty interesting how you just said that, how like one little circumstance in our life that we sort of accept, or that we do accept, can then change the whole trajectory of our life and influence and affect everyone around us, right? I think that's the brilliance of what you just said, but what you're trying to share that, like, and then it just became my habit or what I did. And it's exactly something I think that you're talking about, where you're like, you were thrown out of yours,
Yeah,
right? That thing where you're like, this is how it's going, and someone's like, nope.
yeah.
But you were like, oh, this is how I'm going, nope, we're going here, right? You're this, and that's life, right? That's what makes theater so powerful. That's because that's the stories that we all want to tell.
So when, speaking of your story, in your story, you're Wendy, and at the very end, you are Wynd.
Right.
So you want to share with us where, how you went from one to the other?
Yeah. So it was an evolution. You know, I was Wendy for 60 years, and 30 of them I was married to Greg. And my whole world was upended. And so I don't know, for some reason there was like a graphic that was given to me in my mind, and I actually was going to print it out and distribute it, but I forgot. So I'm going to try to explain it. But imagine a heart with the name Wendy and then Greg, and they share the E. And then Greg flies away, breaks through the heart, and it shatters. And he takes the E, so the only thing that's left is WNDY. And the heart is shattered, and the pieces go to the ground, and the letters collapse. And so they're like that for a long time. And then at some point, the Y kind of perks up and nudges the D, and then the D perks up, and then the Y goes and nudges the N, and the N perks up, and then the Y goes and nudges the W, and the W perks up, and what's left? Wynd.
Wow.
And then Wynd gets stronger and he's happier.
Wow.
Okay, so you three all have very interesting stories. So my question is, are they self-directed, or did you have anybody help you? And if so, tell me how that all worked out.
Well, I took classes at the Marsh with David Ford. He's amazing. If you ever wanted to try something like this, I highly recommend taking a class. It's so much fun. And it's so rich. I mean, I just feel like this whole new life without Greg, you know, this is part of it. You know, I'm part of I'm a Marshian. And I love taking the classes and getting to see other people develop their stories and then critiquing them and getting to know them. And it's a wonderful part of life.
And not yet. This is workshop, so it will ultimately have someone to direct. Who is not me. Who will tell me to stop rewriting while I'm. Hopefully. Yeah.
What's good, when you do the hat. Yeah.
We
can tell the different hats. It's very clear.
Well, thank you. That's, like I said, I've done a lot of theater and I've directed solo plays too. So it's always like, how are you differentiating each character physically?
And the accent.
So you can have different characters and movement. So thank you.
This was, I wrote it, I rewrote it, I directed myself. I mean, Jamila has done some theater, so I performed in front of her. She would give me some feedback, but for myself, I moved to New York City in 1978, and I just didn't know anything. I mean, I've been kind of underdeveloped. That's what I would say purposely. That's part of some other story down the road. And so I just anything that looked interesting, I went after it, and this was when performance studies was taking off, so there was a lot of, I just went and watched as much as I could, and then what I liked, I just incorporated it, monkey see, monkey do, kind of, and it happened to be that, these were left of center activist types that, were trying to make statements about feminism or Marxism or, living in the world responsibly, deconstructing, the military industrial complex, which I was afraid to do. I didn't do anything like that. My stuff was still conceptual, but I learned that you could kind of do it yourself, kind of DIY. And this is gonna sound really bizarre, but didn't spend a lot of money that way. I don't remember, when you don't have, and that's why I kind of left the stuff. Because you need to have a cash flow and pay for stuff, right? And so this was always on the margins, always part of my marginal activism stuff, because that's all I could afford, 'cause it takes forever, You know how long it takes to do all this stuff. You just doesn't happen. Not for me. I work on it. And you have to pay the rent.
Makes sense.
Any last questions before we wrap it up? Well, the last question I have for all of you is, if we want to find out more about you, where you'll be performing or anything else, internet wise, or, how can we get a hold of you? Let's start with you, Wynd. Or where can we find you? Let's put it that way. If
I
you
would,
want to be found.
since I'm retired, I don't know what to say, because before I would have just said, oh, just go to the city college directory in the engineering department. I'm the only woman there, so you'll find me.
But now you're not.
But now I'm not there.
Other from there.
I don't know. I mean, I'll probably continue taking classes at the Marsh, so the Marsh David Ford will know how to find me.
Go ahead.
I don't have a website, I don't do Facebook, I don't do any of the social media stuff, but Alexa has my email address. You can just email me and
Yeah. Well, I am full of shameless self-promotion. Some of my friends and I have like shameless self-promotion, so I do have my own website. It's jerrymetzger.com, and I also am very active in social media, so I have all those things. I have my own YouTube page where I have my trapeze performances recorded, and other theater performances. I'm instrumentalist. I have music recordings on there, so if you Google me, you're gonna find a whole lot of stuff.
Actually, if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see my divorce party. I called it my recoup, my relinquishing ceremony unwedding party, and I sing and dance and.
Oh, I have a question. Did your husband get part of your pension in the retirement, in the settlement?
No, but I had to pay him off. I mean, it was, he didn't, but he got a lot, but yeah, it was kind of shocking how cutthroat he got. I mean, it was just, the whole thing was just shocking. And then he went to this crazy situation. Yeah. Hard to understand.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, anyway, no, but I remember him as he was when I was married to him, and he wasn't the same person when he left.
Well, I want to thank the three of you, not the four of you, and Jerry. I think I told you. Metzger, I don't know what, I'm sorry if I
I
did.
don't recall you saying that.
Well, I don't know, not on my mouth. I said four and there's only three, so but anyway.
Well, actually, I was many people tonight.
Yeah.
I was about 14 people.
Well, thank you all again, and thank you for coming, so let's applaud all of you. We'll come back again.
You won't be back in 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Yes, 2 weeks, yes.
So you can end your Thanksgiving weekend by coming back and being a little bit more polished, a little bit more practice.